As a 20-year-old male college student, I was excited to take my 18-year-old deaf sister out shopping with me. We've always had a special bond, and I love spending time with her. However, what we didn't expect was for our day to be interrupted by Karen, who had some serious misconceptions about sign language. My sister and I often use sign language to communicate, but we also have some verbal ability. We were in a crowded shopping center with a lot of noise and distractions, but we managed to navigate fairly well. Suddenly, my sister was having trouble understanding me, and I used some signs that must have looked unusual to an outsider. I pointed at my eyes and then at my sister's hands to indicate I needed to see her signs better. That's when Karen approached us. She was a middle-aged white woman with a short haircut and an aggressive demeanor. She demanded to know what we were doing with our hands, and I tried to explain that my sister was deaf and we were communicating. However, Karen was not having it. "I don't care what you're doing, those are gang signs and you need to stop," she yelled. "I'm calling the police right now." I tried to reason with her. "Ma'am, please understand that my sister is deaf and we are just trying to communicate. We are not doing anything wrong." But Karen wasn't listening. "You're just making excuses," she said. "I know gang signs when I see them." As Karen continued to berate us, I could feel the tension building. My sister and I just wanted to finish our shopping and go home, but Karen wouldn't let up. People passing by were starting to stare, and I felt like I was being judged. As we tried to ignore Karen and go about our shopping, she kept following us and making comments about our supposed criminal activity. "Hey, what are you two up to?" she shouted. "Are you throwing up gang signs or something? I've seen this kind of thing before." I could feel my blood boiling, but I knew I had to stay calm for my sister's sake. "No, we're just talking to each other," I explained. "My sister is deaf, so we use sign language. There's no need to be worried." Karen scoffed and crossed her arms. "I don't buy it," she said. "You kids are up to something, I just know it. I'm calling the police." My sister and I exchanged a worried glance. We didn't want any trouble, but we also didn't want to stop communicating with each other. As we stood there, Karen made good on her threat and called 911, claiming that she had witnessed a gang-related disturbance and needed immediate assistance. My sister and I were terrified and confused, but we tried to cooperate with the police officers who arrived on the scene. As we waited for them to arrive, Karen continued to make a scene, shouting about how we were criminals and needed to be stopped. Finally, the police officers arrived on the scene, and we felt relieved that help had finally arrived. "What seems to be the problem here?" one of the officers asked. Karen immediately started shouting, pointing at us and insisting that we were part of a gang. "These kids are dangerous," she said. "They're throwing up gang signs and plotting something." The officers approached us and asked what was going on. My sister and I explained that my sister was deaf and we were using sign language to communicate. "We're not doing anything wrong," I said. "We're just talking to each other." The officers asked us to demonstrate some basic signs, which we did. "See?" I said. "It's just sign language. There's no need to be worried." I could see from their facial expressions that the officers were starting to understand the situation. They looked over at Karen and started talking to her, but I couldn't hear what they were saying because they were a distance away. Karen was still insisting that we were up to no good, but the officers seemed to be ignoring her and focusing on us. One of the officers gestured for us to follow him, and we walked away from Karen and the crowd of people who had gathered. Once we were a safe distance away, the officers asked us more about our communication needs and how we navigated the world as a deaf person. "It must be tough," one of the officers said. "I can't imagine how hard it would be to communicate with people who don't understand sign language." I could see from their expressions that they were genuinely interested and compassionate, which made me feel grateful. After a few more minutes of conversation, the officers radioed for a car to come pick up Karen and take her away. As she was being escorted out of the shopping center, she continued to shout and make a scene. As Karen was being escorted out, she continued to shout, "I know what I saw! These kids are up to no good!" I couldn't believe how stubborn she was being, but I was just grateful that the police officers were able to defuse the situation without any violence. One of the officers turned to my sister and asked for her name, before realizing his mistake and signing sorry to her. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Despite the tense situation, the officer's genuine mistake broke the tension and made us all feel a little bit better. "Hey OP, I just wanted to say that I support you and your sister. Karen was way out of line and it's ridiculous that she thought sign language was gang signs. It's frustrating when people jump to conclusions and make assumptions without trying to understand. But I'm glad the police officers were able to handle the situation and help you out. Honestly, the story does sound a bit far-fetched to me, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if something like this actually happened. Either way, it's a good reminder to be more understanding and not jump to conclusions. Has anyone else had a similar experience or witnessed something like this before? My mother-in-law tried to stop my wife's life-saving treatments. Allow me to introduce you to my late mother-in-law. I'll call her Carol. for the sake of variety. Though I've heard many stories about her, for the most part I'll stick with things that I witnessed myself. There are enough of them. I don't think Carol ever met a New Age concept that she didn't like. Her expressed goal was to synthesize all religion, science, and mysticism into a unified whole. Asterisk. All of it. To this end, she amassed a large collection of books and stranger objects from her travels, with an especial focus on healing. Her library had volumes about vibration manipulation, curative trampolining, homeopathic color therapy, and on and on. I am not joking or exaggerating here. Her shelves had lots of admittedly pretty mineral crystals, along with bottles of Magic Goddess essence water, evaporated away, and bogus radon protectors powered by diagrams of geometric figures. Her favorite book, based on the number of annotations and sticky notes, was hundreds of pages of word salad about spiritual beings from the star Arcturus. That's Arcturus, spelled with an H, because of h-bar, Planck's constant from physics, except that Planck's constant is denoted by H and h-bar is the reduced Planck's constant. It's important to get the details right when you're dealing with spiritual beings. Her pentagonal home was custom-built around an energy vortex that she discovered in the coastal peaks of British Columbia. Carol's parenting was, how shall I put this, more darkly eccentric. She was physically and emotionally abusive to her children. One still has some pencil lead embedded in his hand from when she stabbed him because she wasn't satisfied with his piano practice. She attacked one with a kitchen knife. She started slut-shaming her daughter, later my wife, as soon as she grew breasts, for growing breasts. So she forced her daughter to wear 2 large bathing suits, with the apparent intention of making said breasts look smaller by contrast, but with the actual effect that there were wardrobe malfunctions. She was ashamed that her daughter went into medicine and became a noted specialist, rather than supporting her own, non-traditional medical work. My wife got the hell out at age 17 and moved across the country to go to university. For most of the time after that, she went relatively low contact. A decade ago, my wife suffered from a surgical error which resulted in abdominal sepsis and asked me to call her mother. That made me understand just how deathly serious the situation was. I was to call in the family for what might be the last time. I hadn't grasped that her life was truly at risk until that point. Nothing less would have induced her to try to get her mother to visit. To her credit, Carol hurried out for what was supposed to be a couple of weeks. It was expected that in that time, my wife would be either dead or on the road to recovery. Carol stayed in our home, and at first things didn't go too badly. For the most part, we just didn't talk about the treatments that my wife was undergoing. Carol did express concern about the antibiotics that were being given, since according to her own views, antibiotics did nothing but harm. But a couple of weeks stretched into a couple of months, and Carol became harder to live with. She was angry when I stroked my wife's hair with my hand because I was blocking the energy from her chakra. She started blaming me for having somehow caused the nausea that the botched surgery was supposed to cure. I drove her out to pick up a magical concoction of essential oils, on the condition that she check with one of the doctors before applying them. I pointed out that if the mixture had the power to heal, then it also had the power to cause harm, which Carol denied. When we got back to the hospital, I nabbed one of the residents when we reached my wife's floor to ask about that. Carol became furious about that, and it was clear that she had had no intention of talking with the doctors. At home, she became more abusive to me. She was claiming that I was abusing my wife by not letting her have her things in the house. At that point, I lost my temper, the first time I'd yelled at a person in literally a couple of decades. I told her that almost everything in sight was actually her daughter's, displacing my stuff. The sofas, the piano, tables and chairs, the bookshelves, and the electronics. The shelves for the CDs and DVDs were mine, but half the contents were hers. Carol wanted to know if I'd be continuing the herbal remedies after she left, and I told her that that was up to my wife. I'd continue them if she wanted. I'd stop them if she preferred. Carol screamed that I was abusing my wife by asterisk following her own wishes rather than her mother's. On the night before Carol was finally supposed to be heading out, I was restless. That particular nightmare was about to end, but my wife was still quite ill. I got to thinking about that essential oil mixture, which included both oil of cloves and oil of cinnamon. Those are both strongly irritating if left on the skin, and Carol had been painting my wife's feet with the stuff. Her feet were apparently the correct energy points to draw out the infection. I went online and found the manufacturer's instructions, which specified that the oil needed to be significantly diluted with some neutral oil if it was going to be applied to the skin. Carol hadn't even been using the stuff properly. Well, that explained why the skin on my wife's feet was asterisk yellow and starting to peel asterisk. But Carol was furious when I calmly pointed out the problems that she was creating, out of ignorance. A few days after Carol left, my wife took a turn for the worse and had to go back into the intensive care unit. And I dreaded the phone call that I had to make, not because of the bad news, but because I anticipated how Carol would react. And she didn't disappoint. If you really loved her, you'd put her back onto the herbal oil and stop the antibiotics. You know perfectly well they don't do a damn lick of good. At which point, I hung up. I had other things to worry about. My wife pulled through, after months in hospital and 3 stays in ICU. She's still in poor health. I told her that I was putting my foot down. Under no circumstances was her mother welcome under my roof again. She had grossly abused her privileges as a house guest. I didn't care about the family custom that family members were always welcome to stay as guests. I would not stay under the same roof as her mother. Having heard my stories, and based on her own experiences, my wife agreed. A few years ago, Carol died, much as she had lived. She was diagnosed with metastasized lung cancer. Although she did undergo some real medical therapies, she relied mostly on her quack remedies: pawpaw twig powder, whey protein, immune boosters, and the like. The usual crap that ethics-free swindlers pawn off on desperate sufferers. She firmly believed that all the little white spots on her lung x-rays were a good sign, and that her rapid weight loss indicated that her boosters were draining the cancer away. If there's some existence after death, I hope she came to appreciate all of the harm that she did in life. Except, a couple of nights after she passed away, I was driving from the hospital back to the Energy Vortex house. The rental car's navigation device suggested a shorter route than I'd taken to get there, but that route turned into a back road, into a rough road in the hills, into a track through the forest, and in pitch darkness apart from my headlights, over a rocky bump and asterisk, directly into a tree trunk asterisk. Luckily, I was traveling slowly and stopped in time. As I paused, shaken, I got to wondering if there might be something to Carol's worldview after all, and if her vengeful spirit might have possessed the GPS device, making one last try at killing me. You're a lucky man to have survived such an ordeal. I hope you and your wife will be able to get past this traumatic experience and that your wife can recover from her injuries. Won a lawsuit against a guy who tried to force me out of business because I broke his local monopoly. I am 26 years old, and I decided to open my own business this year. Moving forward in this post, I should point out that I am from a small town, 1,000 people, in the rural Midwest. Because of this, everyone has some sort of connection with someone. We went to one of the liquor stores in the closest city 30-ish minutes away. Small city, 8,000 people. When we were grabbing some alcohol for a party, I was looking at the prices and saw how insane the prices were. For a 6-pack of a local beer, we were charged $15. I was thinking about this and figured that I could probably make bank opening a liquor store. Back in February, I was furious about my shitty job and thinking out loud how cool it would be to own my own business to a friend. My friend's mom happened to be the president of the local bank. He told me, "Hey, with the pandemic, the bank has been struggling to find customers to give out loans. Right now, the bank is giving loans for cheap." A couple of weeks later, I went in and met with my friend's mom and pitched my idea with the research I had done on alcohol prices, potential demand, and estimated income. I got the loan at a fantastic interest rate. I bought a building, which happened to be the former bank, and hired my dad to help me renovate the building. My dad is a general contractor, and he gave me an excellent quote on materials and labor. After working everything out with the distributors, getting the proper licenses, and getting my paperwork I needed for the government, I was ready to open my liquor store in May. I had started taking out ads in the local newspaper advertising my store and my prices. When I was in talks with my distributors, I learned, even with inflation and everything else, the liquor stores in the city had like an 80% markup. I talked to a local business owner, and he suggested that I have around a 35% to 40% markup. Because of this, I was significantly cheaper than the closest liquor store and had a much wider selection than the gas stations and small local stores nearby. My hometown is near a national forest. As such, we have a ton of people who come up for weekends for recreational activates year-round. My first week, the week before Memorial Weekend, after opening, I had made a $4,000 profit. It was great being my own boss. If someone was rude to me or my girlfriend, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can do your business elsewhere." If someone tells my GF, "Go back to China, you chink bitch," they can pay me 15% more at the register. Did the gang and I run out of alcohol? Time to grab my keys. Not car keys, the store keys. My apartment is like 2 blocks away. And go to the store. That's not to say that it wasn't difficult running my own business, especially that my only employee was my GF, and we were both working 6 or 7 10 to 12-hour days a week. I was both manager, accountant, and cashier. But fuck, it's so much nicer knowing I can tell someone to pound sand for being a prick. Couple of weeks after Memorial Day, some old guy walks into my store a couple of minutes after I opened. He seemed friendly enough, but eventually he offered to buy my store. I'm not going to say the amount, but it wouldn't have even covered my principal on the loan. I rejected the proposal outright and refused to negotiate the sum higher. He walked out of my store saying, "Welp, you'll be sorry you rejected that offer." The next month, a guy walked into my store and asked if I was the owner. After saying yes, I was informed that my business was being sued by this random guy I never heard of for libel. After he left, I was freaking out and I decided that I was going to close early. When I got home, I Googled the guy and soon saw a picture of the guy that tried to buy my store. It turns out that that is the guy who owns both of the liquor stores in the nearby city. It also just so happens that he is on city council. With a little bit of further digging, I learned that this city has an ordinance that reads, "Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol." Later I discovered that the same guy happens to be the head of the board which approves liquor licenses. I love small-town corruption. Either way, I had a major issue. My maternal uncle happens to be a lawyer in a neighboring state. I decided to call him and try to get some legal advice. I talked to him and read the documents that I had been handed/served over the phone and the research I had done. After receiving all of the information I had read off, I was expecting to get some sort of advice but instead heard, "Hang on, I gotta make a call," and he hung up. I'm freaking out. I was actually about to post my first post to our legal advice. I'll be honest, I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and I didn't need to crawl to this guy on my hands and knees. As I was writing the title, my uncle called back, "Hey OP, I just got off the phone with my partner. He agreed that we can take your case pro bono. If you would like to accept, we can discuss at my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is how I learned that my uncle is on the bar in 3 states. So we meet, and we discuss the case. It turns out that the guy filed the libel suit against my business based on the ads I took out in the local newspapers. He claimed that my ads were targeted to damage his and his business's reputation. There were a few other things that I had no idea what was being referenced, but Uncle assured me that we would win this case no problem. 3 weeks later, the case is dismissed, but after my uncle says, "People like that piece of work will likely try to file another suit against you. If that happens, call me and promise I will help." The next day I get served again, but this time I am the defendant. Not my store, me. I swear to God I look at the documentation and the only thing that changed was instead of my business's name, mine is listed as the defendant. Same thing happens. 4 weeks later the case is dismissed. Over the next 3 months I was sued just as many times. Before the 5th case's hearing we had a settlement meeting. My uncle, the judge, the guy suing me, his lawyer, a bailiff and I were sitting in this room. Judge says, "You two have been in court 4 times already. Is there any way we could come to an agreement that'll stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" The guy's lawyer says they have an offer, and hand it to my uncle who then hands it to me. It essentially read that he'll stop all litigation if I sell my business for about 30% of remaining loan principal. I outright rejected the offer and made a counteroffer. I said, "If you drop this case, I won't sue your ass for harassment." He busts out laughing. "Sue me? With what money? The legal fees alone ought to have drained you. You should be happy I chose to extend this offer and not sue your ass into bankruptcy and buy that shithole from the bank when the foreclose on your dumb ass." The judge, the bailiff, and the guy's own lawyer were all looking at him aghast for saying the silent part out loud about the real reason I was getting sued. My uncle straight out said to him, "Oh, I am sorry. Apparently you were never told. I have taken all of my nephew's cases pro bono. The only money he has spent on your litigations is gas. And bluntly, sir, I think your outburst has just ensured a suit against you." After that, we just left, and I was then informed a few days later the litigation was dropped. Right now, my uncle and I are talking about the future suit against the guy. I want to sue the guy for a very high amount to try and get press attention on this guy and his sketchy actions. Although my uncle warned me that we'll need to be careful because if we set the damages too high, it'll look like we're just being vindictive. This suit won't be pro bono, but after getting sued 5 times for free essentially, I am not going to complain. Looking back on this, I am so thankful that my friends and family supported the entire way, especially my uncle. Without my uncle, I would have absolutely lost my business. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. I can't even imagine. It must have been so awful, especially for you and your girlfriend. I'm glad she's doing better now. I don't know if you're interested in pursuing any legal action against this person, but it seems like a good idea to me, at least if she has insurance, which is likely. If nothing else, the stress of dealing with this and the other issues that are probably affecting your life right now could be lessened by taking action against this person, who deserves it and clearly has no sense of empathy or remorse. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the video on your screen right now, where a Karen teacher confiscates my inhaler, thinking that it's a vape. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.